Hello, I'm Sarah Smith, President and General Manager of KMBC.
And I'm Joe Reardon, President and CEO of the Greater Kansas City Chamber of Commerce. Our votes on August 2nd are important. They'll determine the kind of leadership we'll have, not only in Missouri, but Kansas as well. Our chamber members want strong leaders who support an agenda that lets Greater Kansas City grow. And we're pleased to co-host tonight's debate between Missouri's 4 GOP gubernatorial candidates.
Commitment 2016 is part of KMBC's ongoing pledge to help you get to know the candidates and where they stand on important issues. We hope tonight's gubernatorial debate provides you with critical information and clarity you need to make an informed decision on Election Day.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome. Thank you for joining us. KMBC 9 News Commitment 2016 coverage of the Missouri Republican primary debate. I'm Chris Ketz, along with our political reporter Michael Mahoney tonight. Next week, voters in Missouri will head to the polls to cast their ballots. So now, let us meet the candidates. Peter Kinder has served as Missouri's lieutenant governor since 2005. Kinder also served as president pro tem of the Missouri Senate. Prior to that, he was the associate publisher of the Southeast Missourian newspaper in Cape Girardeau. John Bruner is the former CEO of Vijon Incorporated, a personal care products company based in Wellston, Missouri. Bruner is a former Marine Corps captain and was a 2012 candidate for the United States Senate. Catherine Hanaway was the first woman to be Missouri House Speaker. She's also a former chief federal prosecutor for Eastern Missouri. Hanaway has spent the past 6 years in the private sector. Eric Greitens is a former Navy SEAL who served 4 deployments overseas, including in Iraq and Afghanistan. Greitens is the founder and former CEO of the Mission Continues, a nonprofit group helping veterans in their post-military transition. Each campaign has agreed to the rules for this debate. All candidates will be given 90 seconds to answer each question. If a candidate is mentioned by an opponent, they'll have an optional 30-second rebuttal. And near the end of this debate, each candidate will be given 90 seconds to make a closing statement. Our timer here at the desk is Jane Reinhardt. Michael.
Candidates, all of you are vigorous defenders of the Second Amendment and law enforcement, and so are many legislators in Missouri. But the mayors of the 2 largest cities in Missouri don't think that Jefferson City understands their problems, in particular the role of guns in urban crime. And so the question to you is, do you understand that point of view from Mayor James and Mayor Slay? And would you entertain any sort of local control over gun laws in Missouri for the 2 biggest cities? And we'll begin with Mr. Kinder.
Thank you for this opportunity, and I would say that I reserve the right to disagree with the 2 mayors of our 2 largest cities. I believe that they have problems that go beyond what they call common sense gun control. Missourians have repeatedly rejected those measures and elected representatives and senators to express their will, and that is to grant to Missourians, which I participated in overriding the veto, that won the right to carry concealed weapons for Missourians when I was in the Senate. And I also have supported a number of extensions of the Second Amendment rights of law-abiding gun owners to defend ourselves. Now, one of these attacks occurred very recently in the city of St. Louis down by Busch Stadium. There was an attempted carjacking, a very violent attack, and the fellow who was being attacked happened to be a concealed carry permit holder. He was able to shoot back and defend himself. He put his attacker in the hospital, suffered a leg wound himself, but he put his attacker in the hospital, and the attacker died a couple of weeks later of those wounds. That's an occupational hazard if you're going to go into the carjacking business. I trust Missourians to defend themselves and to discharge this right and this responsibility responsibly. And I agree with the chief of police of the city of St. Louis, who laid the fault on the judges who are too lenient in bail with violent criminals.
Mr. Bruner.
Now, I'm a strong supporter of the Second Amendment. In fact, I'm the only candidate that's been endorsed by Gun Owners of America. And I believe in our constitutional rights, and I will always stand for our constitutional rights. I believe that every individual should have the right to protect themselves and their family. Both my wife and I have a carry and conceal permit, and I would support the constitutional carry. You see, the problem we have here, and I guess the University of Chicago brought this out in a study, is that most criminals do not get their guns at gun shops. They get them on the street. They pick them up wherever they can. And we have a real challenge here in terms of the criminal element. but we need to have a strong support of our local police, give them the resources they need. Right now, they're overtaxed, and we're asking them to do way too much. Folks, these folks are under attack. The Ferguson effect, maybe we'll have a question about that a little bit later, has come across this state and across the country, and more resources are needed to support the local police. In my community, and it was kind of a tough area, just a few miles from Ferguson and Wellston, and I've had experiences. I've had experience with criminals, some tough situations in that environment. We had a chief of police years ago answering an alarm in our building, and as he drove by a liquor store, there was a break-in there. He was shot and injured. It's a tough environment, tough area, but what I do believe is that when citizens have the right to carry and conceal weapons, our constitutional carry, that is the best deterrent for crime.
Mrs. Hanaway.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me tonight. Thank you to all the viewers at home. This is such an important question. I actually have prosecuted hundreds of gun crimes in the city of St. Louis and in the 47 counties in Eastern Europe. In Eastern Missouri. A little bit nervous tonight. It's a big night. We're just 6 days out from the primary election. But I prosecuted hundreds of gun crimes, yet I still have an A rating from the NRA because the NRA knows that there are more than enough laws on the books to go after the criminals who are arming themselves. But we need leadership that will enforce those laws. And that's what I did when I was a federal prosecutor. When I was Speaker of the House 12 years ago, we passed concealed carry. I supported it. I voted for it. The governor vetoed it. We didn't have veto-proof majorities then, so I had to go find 18 Democrats to join with us. We overrode the governor's veto. I've been supporting constitutional carry for more than a year. I'm proud to support it because I think it gives Missourians the ability to carry a weapon without having the bureaucracies of state or local government collecting their information. We know that the state sent gun permit holders' information to the federal government on 3 occasions, even though it was in violation of Missouri law. We need to have constitutional carry here. Governor Nixon vetoed it. If I were governor, I would sign it the minute it hit my desk because it is a deterrent. We see these mass shootings happen time and time again in gun-free zones. We need to make sure that all Missourians have all law-abiding Missourians have the ability to protect themselves.
Mr. Greitens.
Yeah, Chris, the people of Missouri have the constitutional, God-given right to defend themselves and their families. And it's a shame when politicians like Jay Nixon and Chris Koster blame the crime problem in St. Louis and Kansas City on law-abiding citizens. The reason why we have the problem that we do in St. Louis and Kansas City is because Attorney General Koster and Governor Nixon has abandoned our police officers. Look, our police officers deserve to have a leader who respects what it means to put on body armor and wear a sidearm. They deserve to have a leader who respects what it means to say goodnight to your family and step into the dark and do dangerous work. And since Governor Nixon and Chris Koster abandoned our police officers in Ferguson, we're seeing that effect all over the state. The worst place in the state right now is St. Louis, which is the murder, rape, aggravated assault, and robbery per capita capital of the country. Rates of violent crime in Kansas City and Springfield are triple the national average. We need to have a strong leader who's going to come back and support our law enforcement officers. So let's be clear. When I'm governor, first week of my administration, we're going to pass a law. If you assault a police officer in the state of Missouri, you're going to prison and you're not coming out. Our police officers need to know that they're supported. You know, when I came back from Iraq, I started my own business. And one of the things I did in that business was I trained police officers here in Missouri and around the country. One of the things that the guys who I trained with was a guy named Lou Hicks. Lou used to always say to our officers, "You are the Constitution in action." And what we've seen in places like Dallas is our law enforcement officers going out to protect the constitutional rights of others, and they were gunned down. When I'm governor, this comes to an end. We're going to have the backs of the police officers who are always on call for us.
You know, by the time this primary campaign is over, upwards of $20 million will have been raised and spent for a job that pays roughly, what, $130,000 a year. And I think to a lot of Missourians, what do you say to the Missourian who says, with all of this money that's not just coming from out of state but from within Missouri, what do you say to the Missourian who says, you know what, this is a job that is now up to the highest bidder? Mr. Bruner, first to you.
Well, we have incredible challenges here in Missouri. We're in 47th place. And as a business person in a difficult community here, I saw lives changed in the impact of a good job. And frankly, there's a lot of law and order in a job. and we're 47th going to 50th place. I tell you, we worked together as a team. We built respect. We trusted each other. We shared the good times and the tough times. And we took this small, struggling company and turned it to be the largest in our industry in America. And yet in that environment, it was a tough environment. Other companies were closing down. Other companies were leaving. But we continued to provide the jobs at a second shift and a third shift. Folks, my motivation is, what can I do? What can I do to help Missourians all across this state? How can I lift up the lives and improve their opportunities to send their kids to colleges, buy a new home, improve their way of life? And folks, this is worth the investment. I'm the one person who's putting in my own hard-earned money into this state, because we're not taking it with us. We're all passing through this world. And if I can do something to help others on a broader scale, as I've done in my small business, to me, that is the most motivating opportunity that I can possibly comprehend. I'm here for folks all across the state. I'm not looking for a job. I'm not looking to jumpstart a political career. I'm not looking to extend a political career. I'm here for the voters and citizens of Missouri.
Mrs. Hannaway.
Well, we have a $27 billion state budget. We have almost 6 million people who live here in Missouri. The fact that millions of dollars are being spent to decide who the next leader is may be a good thing. This is a serious question. We have failed to grow jobs in this state. Our leadership has failed us in Ferguson and brought riots and arson and assault of police officers there. We've had a police officer shot in the back in Baldwin. Tragically, on the Kansas side of the line, a police officer was killed. Many of these failures, including the protests at the University of Missouri, are directly related to how the elections turned out the last time. So I'm not disappointed. I'm encouraged that thousands of Missourians around the state are taking an interest in participating. I'm pleased to have more individual donors than anyone on this podium from all parts of the state. The lowest donation I received was from a woman here in Kansas City. It might have been the smallest in amount, but it meant the most to me. It was for $4, and she had to write a check for those $4. But as I go to bed at night, it's her sacrifice that I'm thinking about, and her desire for us to have law and order back in Missouri and to bring back quality jobs to our great state.
Mr. Greitens.
Yeah, Chris, the reason why this campaign, my campaign, is taking off is because we've made our case to the people of Missouri. The people of Missouri recognize that career politicians are failing them. When they look at the crisis in Ferguson, when they look at the chaos at the University of Missouri, when they look at the crisis in our economy, they see that the backwards priorities of the career politicians, special interest insiders, and well-paid lobbyists have been taking our state in the wrong direction. And the reason why they're excited by this campaign, and they're coming out, thousands of people are coming out to our events, to town halls all over the state of Missouri, because they recognize that we represent an alternative. I'm the only candidate who's willing to fight against the political establishment. I'm a Navy SEAL, an entrepreneur, a concerned husband and father, and I can't stand by any longer and watch as career politicians continue to hurt real people. We're winning this campaign because we've run a grassroots campaign making our case to the people of Missouri. And that's why the people of Missouri are supporting us.
Mr. Kinder.
Well, I think you actually understated the number, Chris. I think the three candidates flanking me will spend together around $22 million by themselves. And I will bring up the rear in spending with my grassroots fundraising effort in this state at about $2.5 or $2.6 million. Now, I'm running the Lean and Mean campaign. I'm running the campaign that is not laden up with consultants, as my opponents have, the named consultants in this state. I'm consultant free, and I'm having a great time driving around in my F-150 Ford pickup made here in Kansas City at the Clay Como plant, while my opponents drive around in expensive, gigantic buses. I'm out there with a positive campaign, which I think is what the people want. I think they want, and I said this at my announcement, they want candidates who will lay facts and fair argument on the table and let the people decide, and not get a bucket of slime and dump it on the head of your opponent. And I pledged a positive campaign, and as we near the end of this primary, I have kept that pledge, even as I've been attacked by some of my opponents. I have not answered in kind. And I think what people are concerned about is the extreme negativity, and I think they're sick of it. That's why I put an ad out there with my talking in the foreground and some kids behind me slinging mud at each other. And I think Missourians are tired of that kind of campaign, but I think it's important that we get our message out, and we have to raise a lot of money to go buy ads on your air.
And my mortgage appreciates. Candidates, as you know, earlier this week, the Missouri State Supreme Court struck down a law that it said would have reduced unemployment benefits in the state of Missouri to 13 weeks from 20 weeks. Now, it struck it down on a legislative technicality, but the question here is, as governor, would you support legislation and sign it when it gets to your desk that would drop unemployment benefits back down to the 13-week level from the 20-week where it now is after this Supreme Court ruling? Back down to 13 weeks? Mrs. Hanaway, you first.
Yes, Mike, I would sign that legislation. Our welfare system here in Missouri is fundamentally broken. Until very recently, we were the worst state in the country at moving people from welfare back to work. The all-in package today is nearly $27,000 a year. We have teachers and police officers starting at salaries lower than that, and those benefits are tax-free. I favor a system where we are bringing back quality jobs, so everyone that wants a job can have one, but even those who maybe don't want a job, if they are able-bodied, I think we should have rules here in Missouri that require them to work if they're going to receive any benefits from the state, and the state might have to find gainful things for them to do. I also favor drug testing for those who are receiving welfare benefits in this state. It's a combination of things. We have to have great schools so our kids are prepared, and we need to bring back vocational and technical education so that our kids are prepared for the jobs that are there. And we need to be bringing back great jobs, and hopefully we're going to talk about our plans for reinvigorating this very sluggish economy here in Missouri. But we need to reduce those welfare rolls, restore the dignity of a hard day's work, and get Missourians working again.
Mr. Greitens.
Yeah, Chris, in order for us to address this problem, we have to reform welfare in the state of Missouri. Missouri has been ranked 50th out of the 50 states in moving people off of welfare to work. Now, I've actually done this work. When I came back from Iraq, I started an organization, The Mission Continues. We're now working with over 8,000 veterans in all 50 states. And we've helped those veterans come back, and some of them found themselves in tough places, Chris. They found themselves on food stamps. They found themselves on welfare. We helped them off. We help them to get quality, good-paying jobs. We help them to start and to run their own businesses. So Sheena and I have had these men and women around our kitchen table. And what a lot of the career politicians don't recognize is that we have a completely backward system in Missouri. Let's say in Missouri you're a single mom, you're making $12.50 an hour. Your boss comes to you and offers you a $5 an hour raise. Well, what happens in Missouri is that immediately you're going to lose $1,800 in food stamps, you lose $1,300 in housing subsidies, you lose $3,400 in child care subsidies, got to pay an extra $1,600 that you lose from the earned income tax credit, you pay an extra $600 in taxes. That single mom, even if she's only working 30 hours, that raise should have been worth $8,000 to her, but she loses $8,500. We've got a backwards system. When I'm governor, we're going to build a system so you always make money if you work. So it always makes sense to take a raise. So it always makes sense to work more hours and to make more money. We can build a thriving economy here rooted in the core values of hard work and personal responsibility, where we create more private sector paychecks and bigger private sector paychecks.
Mr. Kinder.
I would have signed the bill. The answer is yes. And I believe the legislature will pass that bill again. Look, when you pay people not to work, what you find is that they stay on the unemployment benefits right up to the last 2 or 3 weeks. Then they go start looking for a job, and very often they can find them. But too many people can't find decent jobs in this Obama, Nixon, Koster economy that is leaving Missourians behind. Hundreds of thousands of Missourians have left the labor force altogether, as millions have nationwide, in discouragement. We have lousy, slow rates of economic growth, 1 to 2%. A growth rate of 3 to 4% by passing common sense conservative reforms to our labor market laws, to our on the fiscal side of state government, and tort reform, lawsuit reform could move this state forward to 3 and 4% growth, combined with prudent reductions step by step in our income tax rate that is too high at 6% when we're surrounded by tax cutting states. It's too high here. and it starts at too low a level, we would have a dynamic economy throwing off a lot of growth, increasing job opportunities, and you wouldn't need to be having a discussion about how long unemployment benefits should be.
Mr. Bruner.
We need to go in a better direction. I would sign that legislation. And the bottom line issue in the summary here is that we need our safety nets, but we don't need hammocks. We need to ensure that those who do need the need and have the needs are taken care of, but that it doesn't become a hammock. And I'm the only candidate who has seen firsthand, particularly in an economically depressed area, what happens when you have a job and an opportunity. And where you have a growing business, where you're looking for people and you're expanding to the second shift, the third shift, and you're desperately looking for people from around the neighborhood that you're willing to train and help and get into the workplace and have good benefits and have good health care. I've seen this now for 3 decades. It's been absolutely incredible. And the problem is we're going the opposite direction. Companies are shutting down. They're leaving the state. They're not expanding. I talked to one company. They had to limit the number of employees. They sold off a particular retail shop so they could stay under the hurdle of 50 employees for Obamacare. All of these are reverse incentives. And I know we care, and I do, and I care personally, and I've seen it firsthand, what happens when someone has a job and that opportunity to climb that economic ladder. That's what I want to do, and that's what I've done. And I'm the only one who's done this for decades. It's a great opportunity that we need to look at on the front end on how we can create more jobs, and particularly promoting technical school education. There's a great opportunity for many, many people to get off of welfare.
Question about Ferguson for all of you. This week, as I'm sure you know, a federal judge chose a Cleveland law firm to monitor reforms in the Ferguson police and court system. What do you see moving forward as the state's role, and what will your administrations do to ensure that these reforms are in fact carried out? Mr. Kinder?
Well, I would work with, I have the relationships with the mayor of Ferguson, with some of the city councilmen, the local leaders, the new police chief there. It was I who, when all 3 of my opponents were in Southwest Missouri and heavily Republican county on Independence Day, I was in Ferguson marching in the parade, their Independence Day parade. I've repeatedly gone back to where I announced in that neighborhood, the Ferguson-Delwood neighborhood, and I would work with those local leaders and with anybody named by that judge to implement the reasonable parts of that decree to which Ferguson is a signatory, to which they signed. But I think we need to discuss the larger issue of Ferguson. It was a months-long catastrophe brought to you by the administration of Jay Nixon and Chris Koster, who did not lead this state. Mr. Koster is the chief law enforcement authority in the state of Missouri. They let us down. They turned the streets over to the criminals, the vandals, and the looters. And I went there to say, no more Fergusons, never again will we allow that to happen. I will work with the local police, the county police, the state troopers, and I will use the National Guard for the purpose for which those fine young men and women trained, and not allow any administration in Washington to lean on me to not use those fine guardsmen and women. No more Fergusons, never again.
Mr. Greitens.
You know, Chris, I went down to Ferguson, and I can tell you the great tragedy of Ferguson was that if we had had a leader who'd shown up with any kind of command presence and courage and calm and clarity, we could have had peace by the second night. But our leaders failed to show up. Governor Nixon failed to show up. Chris Koster, the state's attorney general, chief law enforcement officer, failed to show up. And look, Chris, I was down at Ferguson, and I walked around the crowd, and I asked people, I say, what brought you out tonight? People were angry, they were confused, there were all these rumors that were running through the crowd, and there was no one there to communicate with them. I also spoke to our police officers, St. Louis City, St. Louis County, Missouri Highway Patrol. They'd come out to an incredibly difficult, dangerous situation, and there was no plan for peace. We need to have a leader who's going to support our law enforcement officers and go into every community and work to make sure that we also create a sense as leaders that we're listening and that everyone has a shot at the American dream. You know, when Martin Luther King talked about his dream, he said, I have a dream that is deeply rooted in the American dream. Too many kids in too many communities throughout Missouri no longer feel like the American dream applies to them. You know, for African American kids who are growing up here in the state of Missouri, only 2.7% of them graduate from high school having passed a single advanced placement class. That's the third worst rate in the country. We need to have leaders who are willing to go to the front lines, bring people together, and make sure everybody knows that the American dream applies to them, and who's going to have the backs of our law enforcement officers.
Mr. Bruner.
Well, it's interesting as we review the whole Ferguson situation, and I've seen so many politicians and wannabe politicians run up to Ferguson to investigate, and well-meaning in most cases, to try to understand what is going on in Ferguson. Just a few miles from Ferguson is the community that I've worked in. Worked in there for 30 years. And I tell you what I did when I first came and out of the Marine Corps into the community. I went to meet with the mayor. I met with the local churches. I got involved the best you could in that community. It was kind of a broken down community. There wasn't not a lot of touch points that you can engage in. But then we worked with organizations that were involved in training, and I got to know the police. Now, it was a very small police department at that time, but it was all of us pulling together in that community. And I've seen this first shift, second shift, third shift, and I understand what it's like. I'll never forget one time leaving work late at night, and behind me after a few blocks comes a police car with the lights on. And I said, what the heck did I do? I roll down the window, and I look at him, and he says, sir, you know where you are? This is a dangerous neighborhood. And I said, well, I work here. I understand it. And so it is about communities pulling together and individuals pulling together and leaders pulling together. We need to challenge the leaders in those communities to work together, not a top-down approach. And again, I always say there's a lot of law and order in a job. Improving our economy will make a big difference for all of these communities. We're always looking after the fact. Let's get on the front end of our problems so we don't face these same problems again.
Mrs. Hanaway.
Our governor made a fundamental mistake at Ferguson, and it caused much of the unrest there. He prejudged the facts, and he prejudged them wrong. He went there and he said that the police officers should be charged with the crime as soon as possible. That was an invitation to radicals from around the country to come to our state. They burned Ferguson, they looted the businesses, they assaulted police officers. And our governor continued to compound that mistake. He set the curfew at midnight. It should have been sundown. He took command control away from St. Louis County Police and gave it to the Highway Patrol, who are great professional law enforcement officials, but they aren't trained in urban policing. When the police used armored vehicles and helmets and flak jackets, and the New York Times said, oh, you're militarizing the police, Governor Nixon pulled back on that. I don't want it to be a fair fight for the men and women standing on that thin blue line protecting us. And so in each of those cases, I would have gone a different course. We do need to restore the relationships between communities and the police. I prosecuted thousands of cases, and what I can tell you is that we need a bigger investment in community policing. We need to solve more crimes in urban neighborhoods. That's going to take the neighborhoods stepping forward and being witnesses. And I do favor body cameras for police because I think it will show us that they're doing a great job every day in very tough circumstances. And if there is one or two who should be prosecuted, I'll do it. I did it as U.S. Attorney, but the overwhelming majority of those police officers put their lives at risk for us every day.
Candidates, let's talk about Mizzou for a second. Now, you've been very critical, all of you, about how the administration at MU handled this, how Governor Nixon handled it, what Chris Koster has done. So let's see if we can get past the talking points for a second, because here is the question that I'd like you to respond to directly here, and that is, in your administration, how much scrutiny will MU and the MU campus at Columbia in particular be subjected to? And Mr. Greitens, we'll start with you on this. Please, directly on this question.
Yeah, absolutely, Michael. Look, when I'm governor, you're going to have a leader who's going to go straight to the front lines of our problems. The reason why the crisis at the University of Missouri spun out of control was, again, we had a leader who wouldn't go to the front lines, bring people together and work with them. So what I'm going to do specifically is that we're going to appoint a board of curators of people who have experience running outstanding university systems. I will also, as I've done my whole life, go to the front lines, listen to people, bring people together, and solve problems. If people have concerns, you need to have a leader who's willing to go to the front lines and work with them. I will tell you, I've worked with a lot of 19 and 20-year-old men and women. And the men and women who I worked with, they're putting on 80 pounds of gear, walking through the deserts of Iraq and the mountains of Afghanistan. So I tell you, I find it a little hard to hear when I hear students complaining that life on campus is just too tough. I mean, the fact is that 1 year of tuition, room, and board at the University of Missouri costs more than half of the average family income here in the state of Missouri. As governor, if we have a crisis, I'm going to go to the front lines, talk with people, work with them, bring people together. We should be able to be proud of the University of Missouri. It's a university right here in the middle of our state, and when I'm governor, absolutely I'm going to be on top of this problem.
Mr. Kinder.
Well, I'm the one who's been outspoken, and yes, I would have a great deal of scrutiny of the University of Missouri. I'm the one who hears Missourians all across this state, and I want to say to you listening and watching at home, I hear you. You've had a belly full of the politically correct nonsense that has been in the saddle at that university. Here's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for curators who are appointed, nominated by the governor, and confirmed by the vote of the Senate. The president and the chancellor they hire, and a football coach who would say no strikes on our football team. I would have called the bluff of those players. I would have said, if necessary, and I don't think it would have been necessary, I would have gone through and forfeited that game and paid the $1 million penalty in the game against BYU, rather than suffer the damage we've suffered with 2,600 fewer entering students, $36 million in reduced income, and 4 dormitories closed, and the pathetic state of the reputation of the university right now, all because of that avoidable controversy. I will appoint curators who are eminent leading Missourians, who know something, not 8 lawyers out of 9 positions like Jay Nixon did. He put 8 lawyers on a board of curators of 9, and that is what led us to this in part. I would appoint eminent Missourians, leaders in business, agriculture, healthcare, nonprofits, leading people like John Ashcroft put on that board, and we will get the reputation of our university back beginning in January, because the new governor gets 5 curator appointments.
Mr. Bruner.
You know, throughout this campaign, I've heard about all this bashing of the University of Missouri, and I understand the frustration of so many citizens across the state. I've heard grandparents say, I'm not going to have my granddaughter or grandson to go to that school. And I continue to hear this. But folks, I'm a person who tries to fix things, build things, pull things together. It's very easy to criticize and knock down, and particularly as you're going forward, if we're spending a lot of time knocking it down, and then when you're governor, you got to come in there and now fix things after you've been knocking down and criticizing. So I'm the only person who reached out to the acting president of the University of Missouri, and I said, can I come out and visit? Let's have a talk. Now, at first, you have these kind of crossed arms leaning back, doesn't know why I'm here. But we had a good conversation. We found some things that were working.
Scrutiny, sir. Mr. Bruner, scrutiny. What kind of scrutiny?
The scrutiny on the situation, it all comes down to leadership. The most important thing that can be done here to fix that school is find the right leader. That's the case in a company, at a church. As governor of Missouri, you have to find the right leader. I would suspend the board of curators with the lame duck board of curators. Right now, they're on an executive search. You need good, talented people on that board of curators, because if we find the right leader, 90% of the problems are going to be solved. People overuse this term leadership, and I don't think they understand what it really means. I know firsthand, you find the right person. That's critical. I've been in executive searches. I've spent a whole career finding the right people in the right positions. That's how you solve it. I will find a new board of curators. We'll build executive leadership, and then we'll solve the problems with the right leader.
Mrs. Hanaway.
Well, I think the question was, what kind of scrutiny would you give to the university system, and specifically the Columbia campus, if you became governor? And my answer is, I would give it strict scrutiny. You know, as leaders, oftentimes you do call upon others to govern the university for you through the board of curators, but at other times you have to be more hands-on. This is a great university. It is our flagship university, and what happens at the campus in Columbia has an impact on Rolla, on UMSL, on UMKC, and we need a governor who's going to strictly scrutinize key decisions that are being made now. There are a number of acting deans. We have a brand new football coach, a brand new athletic director who's still acting, an acting president. The next governor is going to pick 5 curators. Let me tell you who my 5 will be, not by name, but by experience. We have the finest agriculture school in the country. We're going to have somebody from ag. The University of Missouri runs hospitals. We're going to have somebody from medicine. We have one of the finest science and engineering schools in the country in Rolla. We're going to have a scientist or an engineer. We're going to have a business person, and we're going to have somebody who really understands the needs of higher education. The university isn't hearing Missourians. To go out and have the arrogance to hire a chief executive officer of inclusion, diversity, and equity for $235,000 a year demonstrates to me they're not hearing. As governor, I will hear you.
Well, if Missouri resumes its debate over religious liberties next year, proposing a measure protecting a Missourian's right to do business with an LGBT couple, would you support and sign such legislation if it came to your desk? Mr. Berner?
As a young Marine, I was there to defend the Constitution from all enemies, foreign and domestic, and I stand by our First Amendment rights. And our First Amendment rights include freedom of religion. And with freedom of religion comes responsibility. It's an incredible challenge that we have. And now we're finding ourselves in a number of different conflicts and differences of opinion. But I would go forward and I would support the religious liberty amendment that was proposed, because I do believe in freedom of religion, and I do believe that pastors and priests, ministers, as well as those involved who have strongly held religious beliefs should have that opportunity to practice that. But I tell you, as a Christian, as a believer, I reach out to others. I'm respectful of another opinion, and I understand that we're to treat others as we want to be treated. And you know, we have this issue of discrimination going on. Whatever happened to accommodation? Whatever happened of trying to find out where we can find some of our similar things that we can agree on, the similarities, and those points that have kept us together as a nation as opposed to fractured us. And I also believe, while others people in some of the business community feel that they'd have a negative economic impact, I have always found that prosperity pursues freedom. Where you have freedom, you have more prosperity. So these are difficult and challenging times. You need the right leader who approaches these in the right way, standing strong on our First Amendment rights, but reaching out to others.
Mrs. Hanaway.
Well, I certainly would support a religious liberties amendment and sending it out to a vote of the people, which is what the Missouri Senate passed this year before this continent was even a country. People came here seeking for religious liberty. The First Amendment to our U.S. Constitution protects religious liberties. I do not buy into the arguments that some have made that people won't come to Missouri if we have such an amendment. People are still flocking to the United States, even though we have the First Amendment to our Constitution protecting the free exercise of religion and guarding against the establishment of any religion by the government. Look, to sacrifice a few raised eyebrows from some business leaders, to me, seems a small sacrifice for religious liberty. We've seen Christians through time burned at the stake, stoned. Yesterday, a Catholic priest had his throat slit by radical Islamic terrorists in Normandy, where Americans landed to free Europe from Nazism. I'll always stand up for religious liberty, and taking the scrutiny of a few people who disagree with me is the very least I can do to stand up for the fundamental rights of people to exercise their deeply held religious beliefs.
Mr. Greitens.
Well, look, Chris, the fight before us is clear. It's very clear that people of faith are under attack. You've got the Obama administration's IRS targeting people of faith. You've got the Obama administration trying to force nuns to accept birth control. So when I'm governor, no pastor, no priest, no rabbi, no member of the clergy is ever going to have to participate in any ceremony that they disagree with. Look, I recognize when I served in the military, we served in an organization where we were able to protect everyone's religious freedoms, everyone's religious liberties, while at the same time practicing non-discrimination. We need to have a governor who's going to bring people together. And as governor, I'm going to bring together the faith community, bring together the business community, so that we make sure that we protect everyone's constitutional rights, protect everyone's constitutional liberties.
Mr. Kinder.
This is a founding principle of our country, actually one that predates the American founding, and therefore, I believe, a principle so important, the protection of religious liberty, that we cannot and we must not place a price tag on it. Now, the issue was presented to us in the last legislative session this year in the form of Senate Joint Resolution 39, SJR 39. I supported SJR 39. It was our first bite at the apple, you might say. It was the first time this issue in this framed this way had been placed before the Missouri General Assembly. And a vigorous debate ensued. It passed one chamber, it did not pass the House of Representatives. I think it was a good debate to have. I think the debate will continue. I think there possibly are reasonable amendments that could be offered in the next go-around, in the next legislative session. But yes, we need a religious liberty amendment to go before the voters. And that was all the General Assembly, the House and Senate, was seeking to do. And I had to be a little puzzled at my friends in the business community who came out so fiercely against this. What did they have to fear from having Missourians hear a debate on this and Missourians vote yes or no? I'm standing up for the right of Missourians to be heard from on this debate, to hear both sides and make a decision as to whether this goes in our Constitution or not.
Candidates, a planned tax cut for Missouri was postponed because in the law there was certain criteria and there wasn't enough growth, so that trigger didn't happen. This is sort of a two-part question, really. Number one, what do you think of that, having that trigger in there that would initiate a tax cut? And the second part of it is, for Missourians, especially those of us over here on this side of the state, are there any lessons in the problems that Kansas now has in their budgets as a result of their tax cuts, and does it apply in any fashion to Missouri? So it's sort of a two-part question there. Ms. Hanaway, we'll start with you.
Absolutely. I think we can learn a lot from Kansas. They kind of leapt before they looked. I want to cut taxes in Missouri, but I think it's very important that we look, that we plan, that we budget for those tax cuts before we make them. And here's how I do it. Number one, our state government is far too big. We have 55,000 state employees. Indiana has 28,000 state employees, but more people live there, so I would shrink the size of government. Number two, we're giving away more than $500 million a year in state tax credits to companies that are well-connected, have insiders. It really is the worst of crony capitalism, so I would shrink those tax credits down. And thirdly, I would have an incremental approach to the tax credit with triggers like we have now. The reason it wasn't triggered this year wasn't because individuals' taxes didn't go up. Individuals paid 3.9% more, but corporations paid 16% less. And they either paid less because businesses were leaving the state, or they were taking advantage of these crony capital tax credits, or they were making less money and not able to hire as many people. All of those are bad for the individual taxpayer. We've got to bring down the individual rate in the state of Missouri so that we can be more competitive and bring more jobs here.
Mr. Greitens.
Yeah, look, one of the big lessons, Michael, from the experiment in Kansas was that you got to get control of how the state is spending money. And in Missouri, we've got an out-of-control state budget. You've got a $27 billion budget. And when you look through the budget, there are no measures for performance. You can't tell the people of Missouri what they get for the money that the government spends. So as governor, what I'm going to do is we're going to introduce a system of results and accountability. Every agency of government will have a defined mission. For every line item in the budget, we'll put in place a performance metric so that we can actually see what the government of Missouri is producing. When we do that, and when other conservative governors, conservative outsiders who've come in from the outside have done that, they've been able to reduce government spending. One of the other things that we have to do is that we have to put in place transparency measures in our budget. As Speaker Hanaway mentioned, you've got a budget now which has over $500 million in special interest tax credits. There's no system for results or accountability there. The other thing we need to do is remember, this is the people's money. When Sheena and I write a check, we can wait for the bank to mail us a paper statement, or we can go online and we can see where our money goes. When we run our credit card, we can wait for a credit card statement, or we can go online and we can see where our money goes. Right now, the people of Missouri aren't seeing where their money goes. So when I'm governor, we're going to create MissouriCheckbook.gov so that the people of Missouri can see where their money is going, where every penny is going of their money. This is their money, and we need leaders who remember that.
Mr. Kinder.
I'm for prudently cutting our income tax. It is too high. At 6%, Missouri's income tax is too high. It also starts at a level that is too low at $9,000. To give you one example of a neighboring state, Kentucky's highest rate of income tax starts at $75,000 of income. There's your proof that our tax code was designed many decades ago and is inadequate to the present. I said earlier, and I'll say it again, we are surrounded by tax-cutting states. Kansas is by no means necessarily the model. Nebraska is cutting taxes, Arkansas is cutting taxes, Oklahoma is cutting taxes, and so is Iowa. Now, Missouri, we are frequently told, is a low-tax state, and that's true in some categories, but the devil's in the details, and it's not true in other categories. It's obviously not true in the income tax. Illinois is known as a high-tax state to the east, and their income tax is 3.75% at the highest rate. So we're way above the income tax rate of neighboring Illinois, and we need to get with the program of prudently, step-by-step, incremental reductions of income taxes. And yes, they can have those triggers in it, but we're caught in the awful Hobson's choice right now of the Obama-Nixon-Koster economy, where we're not growing fast enough to earn a tax cut. It was only 0.5%, and we should go ahead with that 0.5% tax cut.
Mr. Bruner.
Well, specifically, I believe in those triggers. You know, as you move from one segment to the next segment to the next segment, you don't want to go off the cliff in any particular direction. You have to move incrementally. And as a business guy, it's all about trends. What is the trends and directions that this state is taking? The other issue in terms of lessons learned, there is not a one-size-fits-all or a single answer. There's not a silver bullet. I'm the only one here who understands competition. I've done this for over 30 years. I've watched different retailers come and go because of the issue of not being competitive. I saw the fall of Woolworth. I saw the rise and fall of Kresge. I saw the rise of Walmart. And then there's Dollar General coming along. It takes a lot of different aspects to be competitive. Our state is not competitive. The underlying issue here, and the question is, we need to grow this state. We need revenues. With more revenues, we can get more things done and accomplished in this state. And there's 4 key areas we have to do. We need to have tort reform. We're the 4th worst in the nation as a judicial hellhole. You know, Chris Koster and the trial attorneys, that's the one business that is working in this state. We need to be tax competitive, what we just talked about. And we need regulatory reform, and we need labor reform. And you need a CEO running this state who understands about efficiencies. If we weren't able to drive efficiencies every year, we could never survive as a business. As CEO of Missouri, I'm ready to lead this economic recovery.
We have come to the point in the evening where it is time for closing statements. We begin first with Eric Greitens.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chris. Look, the choice in this election has become very clear. If you're happy with the results that are being produced by government, then you should vote for any one of my opponents, because you can be sure that with them, nothing is going to change. My opponents combined have been in 20 different elections. 20 different elections. Now, if they were going to make a difference, wouldn't they have done it already? But if, like me, you're outraged by the failures of our government, if you're fed up with the political establishment and you're sick of self-serving politicians who are just looking at the next fundraiser, the next perk or a free meal from a lobbyist, or the next election, then I'd ask you to join me. You know, when I got into this race, I knew that the career politicians would lie about me. You've probably seen some of these lies, some of them even saying that I'm an Obama supporter. So let me be clear so that even the career politicians can understand it. Barack Obama is the worst president of my lifetime, maybe ever. I'm Eric Greitens. I'm a Navy SEAL, a conservative outsider, and I've never run for office. I'm pro-life, pro-gun, conservative to the core, and I'm inviting you to stand with me and to join this fight against the political establishment. I'd be honored to have your vote on August 2nd, because I know that if we stand up together, we can take our state back. If we stand up together, we can turn Missouri around and build a Missouri that we are proud to pass on to our kids and our grandkids.
Mr. Kinder.
Well, I'm proud to stand here 1 year to the month after I announced my candidacy in the distressed community of the Ferguson-Delwood area. And I pledged a positive campaign. I said Missourians don't want endless backbiting, carping, negative attacks campaign. And a year later, I'm standing here as the only one before you who has run that positive campaign. I'm talking about the issues. I'm talking about how we need common sense conservative solutions that will improve our schools, grow our economy, and bring quality jobs here and fight the rising tide of violent crime. I have stayed true to that pledge, and I have the conservative credentials that are unmatched on this stage. Don't take my word for it. Take Missouri Right to Life's word for it, which endorsed me and which gave me their highest award, the Defender of Life Award. Don't take my word for it on the Second Amendment rights of law-abiding gun owners. Take the NRA's word for it, where they've given me their highest rating of A+ that they give to any office holder for defending the Second Amendment rights of law-abiding gun owners. I am the candidate who's been able to put together an urban and rural coalition uniting our state, not only uniting our party in a positive campaign against a tough opponent this fall, but it's actually proven that I can get elected. I think that's what Republicans are looking for in this primary race that you will decide at home next Tuesday on August 2nd. I do make that positive appeal. I make it everywhere in the state, in every corner, and I make it in precincts that usually don't benefit Republicans, and I get a few more votes there. That's how I've won. That's how I can unite our state. I humbly ask for your support.
Mr. Bruner.
Many years ago, as a young Marine, I raised my right hand in the oath of office to defend this Constitution from all enemies, foreign and domestic. Folks, that has no expiration date. As your governor, I will continue that fight that I began as a young Marine to defend our Constitution and defend life. But I will also be the voice of the people. I'm not the voice of the big dollar donors like my competitors here on this race. I understand where you are. I've been on the ground floor. I've been creating the jobs. I've been on the plant floor. I've been on the mission field. I will be the voice of the people. I will be the voice of Zach and his dad down there in Mountain Grove, where the EPA is about to crush their little wood stove business. I understand what it's like. It happened to me. I will be with folks like Pastor Eddie in Springfield, who came and said, my number one prayer request is, Pastor, pray for me. I need a job. I need a job that will pay the bills. I understand about jobs and growth and getting our state back on track because I've done it in my business. But folks, to be the voice, we have to win an election. We need a compelling choice. We need a compelling choice with Chris Koster. And here's the compelling choice. We're going to have basically a politician on one side and a Marine on another side. You're going to have a liberal insider and a constitutional conservative outsider. You're going to have a businessman that really does create jobs. We don't need any more trial lawyers and liberals running this state. That is a contrast to a win. I'm asking for your vote. I'm ready to serve.
And Mrs. Hanaway.
Thank you very much. Thank you to all of those who took the time to watch and have such an interest in the future of our great state. On the 4th of July, because of a woman who lives half a world away that I've never met and likely will never meet, my husband and I got to celebrate with our son his 14th birthday. You see, that woman chose life. And my husband and I went to Eastern Europe and adopted him from an orphanage with 300 children in it under the age of 3. We saw what communism did to those countries. We saw people without hope, without opportunity, because they did not have freedom. Now, that was a while ago, and it's been 12 years since I've run for any office. But I stepped up to run because this one moment involving him keeps ringing in my ears, and it's the moment that we came back from Eastern Europe, and we came through customs, and the last agent we saw said to us, "Congratulations, Mr. and Mrs. Hanaway. Your son is an American." And I knew in that moment that because of our Constitution, he was going to get to work as he wanted, pray as he wanted, live as he wanted. And the truth of what Ronald Reagan said, that freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. So tonight, I humbly ask you for your vote to win this election, yes, indeed, but really to join me in this movement to restore our Constitution, restore our religious freedoms, and to make our state safe and strong again. Thank you.
That is all the time we have this evening. We want to thank you and, of course, all of the candidates for being with us tonight here in Kansas City, for watching our Commitment 2016 coverage. Be sure to get out and vote next Tuesday.